peacekeeping does not work if there is fighting, because it's no longer peacekeeping. It would be peacemaking, which is completely different.
There's a little water down there if you need it at any point.
In 1974, Major-General Alain Forand, as part of the UN peacekeeping mission in Cyprus, found himself in an impossible position.
The mission was to be between the Turkish Cypriot and the Greek Cypriot.
Forand patrolled the Green Line, a demilitarized zone separating the Turkish and Greek populations established in 1964. But by 1974, both sides were at war. To understand this conflict and how the general got here, we need to go back. Cyprus has, due to its strategic location in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, long been a coveted island. It has been ruled by a revolving door of empires over thousands of years. In 1570, the Ottoman or Turkish Empire stormed the island and took it over. This marked the beginning of the influx of Turks to Cyprus. Up to that point, it was predominantly Greek. Fast forward 300 years, and the Ottomans hand over control of the island to Great Britain. But the Ottomans still technically own the island. This won't last for long.
In 1940, the war came, and Turkey was with the Germans.
So Britain annexed the island. Cyprus became an official crown colony in 1925. By the 1950s, Cyprus was a powder keg, ready to explode. Many Greek Cypriots take to the streets, demanding an end to British rule and to become a part of Greece. This is known as enosis.
This created quite a lot of a problem, especially with the Turkish Cypriot, who felt they did not have a space that belonged to them. It was all enclave surrounded by Greek Cypriot.
The Turkish population, once dispersed throughout the island, had become concentrated into Turkish-only areas. They favored a two-state solution, a partition of the island. This is known as Taksim. In 1955, a Greek Cypriot paramilitary group bombed government buildings and killed British and Greek opponents of enosis. That same group later targeted and killed Turkish Cypriot police in an effort to provoke riots in the capital city of Nicosia. In 1959, Britain, Greece, and Turkey got together to come up with a solution which gave neither Greek nor Turkish Cypriots what they wanted. Instead, Cyprus became an independent republic. A power-sharing agreement was drawn up, and Britain still remained on the island, retaining 2 sovereign military bases. 3 years later, the power-sharing agreement fell apart. Violence erupted.
At this stage, the Turkish Cypriots were declaring that it would be impossible ever again to live in harmony with their Greek compatriots.
And there was a lot of killing and, barbarian on both sides.
364 Turkish Cypriots and 174 Greek Cypriots are killed. More than 100 Turkish Cypriot or mixed villages are attacked, and roughly a quarter of the Turkish Cypriot population is displaced.
That's when the United Nations, was asked to provide military support.
UN peacekeeping forces arrived in 1964 and for the next decade attempted to enforce a fragile peace. This came undone in the summer of 1974. On July 15th, a coup was launched by the Cypriot National Guard. It was led by officers from mainland Greece. 5 days later, Turkey invaded Cyprus from the north.
5 o'clock, I think it was around 5 o'clock, somebody said, look, there's parachute coming.
Forand looked up and saw roughly 1,000 Turkish paratroopers dotting the sky.
And then a couple of hours after that, there was about 2,000 other infantrymen that came by helicopter, that landed also in the same area. And then the firing started all over the place, both from the Greek side, the Turkish side. And I said, the situation, is impossible.
The UN blue helmet and the UN flag signals peacekeeping, and you do not fire on peacekeepers. But Forand found these symbols of peace transformed his men into targets.
Plus, we had no vehicle protection. Our guys were doing patrol in bicycle. Well, the last time I looked, it does not offer too much protection.
Since Forand found himself in an active war zone, on July 23rd, he convinced the British to lend him a lightly armored vehicle known as a Ferret.
So with the Brit, I start to patrol.
A mortar fell on a nearby first aid station. Those rushing, trying to put out the fire, were attacked. Forand was ordered to protect them.
So when I arrived there, everything had burned.
Forand began to leave the charred first aid station, but something caught his eye.
I saw some parachutists, running around. I said, what the hell is going on?
Two of Forand's men, Captain Normand Blaquière and Private Michel Plouffe, were escorting Turkish soldiers who were fleeing a failed attack on a Greek location. The Turkish soldiers feared, without an escort, they would be slaughtered.
And as they were going to escorting, I think there were 8 or 9 Turkish soldiers, the Greek started to open fire. And I think there was 4 or 5 Turks that were killed, plus 3 or 4 that were wounded. And Blaquière was hit in both legs, and then Plouffe covered him. So I decided immediately to send the Ferret, to a location. I said, go there, because I'm going to go and get Blaquière and Plouffe, but if they fire at me, I will give you the order to fire. So I dive in to get Blaquière.
As Forand crawled to his men, the Greeks opened fire. With bullets flying towards him, he turned around and gave 2 signals. One to the Brits manning the Ferret, and another to his men on the .50 caliber machine gun. They returned fire.
.50 caliber has a sound, boom, boom, boom. It's really fantastic. When you're there, you hear that sound, you say, my God, I'm protected.
Even with this protective cover, the Greeks still continued to fire on Forand.
Just as I was going down, Plouffe was hit by a bullet. It went through his helmet and through his mouth. So when I arrived there, he opened his mouth and he had the bullet, on his tongue. And we start laughing, crazy, how you react in those circumstances.
Forand then dragged Blaquière, who was shot in both legs, up the creek to safety. But he still had 1 man in danger.
Then I went back to get Plouffe and get him out.
Forand rushed his men to the hospital.
They were able to save Blaquière, and Plouffe just a little bit of a chirurgy, and he was okay.
Forand was awarded the Star of Courage, the 2nd highest award for bravery in Canada.
I just did my job, so for me, it was great that they gave me the medal, but we were a team, that's the mentality that we try to instill in all our soldiers. So to me, I was only doing my job, normal.
Fighting continued throughout the summer. There was a mass exodus moving north and south. More than 150,000 Greek Cypriots and almost 50,000 Turkish Cypriots became refugees on their own island. By the time a ceasefire was negotiated, Turkey had taken over a third of Cyprus. The UN buffer zone was reestablished and extended, carving the island into 2. And not much has changed since then.
There's still a lot of friction between Greece and Turkey. I think it will take a long time, if ever, that they are reunification and that they're able to go back to a certain form of conciliation that they had in the past.
For now, the Greek southern portion is a member of the European Union, and the northern Turkish side is currently recognized by just 1 country in the world, Turkey. 28 Canadian peacekeepers have died in Cyprus. UN peacekeeping forces remain there to this day, patrolling the Green Line. Forand believes the Canadian Armed Forces can still play an integral role in stabilizing the world, much as they did in Cyprus. But he sees an under-resourced military that is not what it once was.
I don't see the future, being rosy. That's unfortunate. The world is here, it's surrounding us. So if problem arise somewhere, it will have an impact on us eventually. And if you're not able to try to help them, then that problem will become yours at one point or another, whether you like it or not.
This video was made in partnership with Canada Company.